There's a reason your tank empties faster than it should, and it's not the price of gas, it's something you do, every week. Without even realizing it, 99% of drivers blame taxes, the market, or the type of fuel. But the truth is far more uncomfortable. There are everyday habits, at the pump, behind the wheel, even in the first seconds after filling up, that are silently burning your money trip after trip. These aren't major mistakes, they're automatic behaviors, things you do on autopilot that nobody ever told you were wrong. The hardest part? You're probably making at least 3 of these mistakes today. And one of them, number 1 on this list, can cost you up to $1,000 a year. Not because of your engine, not because of the gas station, not because of the fuel, but because of something your right foot does every time you drive. And that almost nobody has under control. When you add up all that invisible waste, the result is brutal. 17. Filling up during the hottest hours of the day. There's a detail that many drivers overlook, and while it seems insignificant, over time it can end up hitting your wallet. Fuel doesn't always behave the same way. Gasoline changes slightly with temperature, and during the hottest hours of the day it tends to expand a little. Now someone might say, but gas is stored underground, where it's cooler. And yes, that's true. But here's the important detail. Before reaching your car's tank, that fuel passes through pipes, hoses, and nozzles that can be hot, especially if they've been sitting in direct sunlight for several hours. And here's the key. You buy gallons, but your car doesn't run on gallons. It runs on the energy inside that fuel. In other words, it's not just about how much volume enters the tank, but how much real energy each gallon contains. And when gasoline heats up and its density drops, the available energy per gallon can also be affected. It might sound like a tiny difference, almost invisible. But be careful because these small details don't hurt on a single fill-up. But they do add up when you repeat them throughout an entire year. The consequences can be pretty clear. Lower mileage per tank, more frequent trips to the pump, and in some cases between 1% and 3% more annual spending accumulated over time. Maybe that doesn't sound like much, but if gas is already expensive, why give away even a small portion of your money by fueling up at the worst time of day? The solution is simple. If you have a choice, fill up early in the morning when temperatures are still low, or do it in the late evening or at night when the heat has already dropped. And that's only number 17. What comes next are the mistakes that really hurt your wallet. Some happen every single time you pull into a gas station and have been costing you money for years without you ever noticing. 16. Continuing to pump after the nozzle clicks off. It's happened to all of us. You're filling up your tank, you hear the first click of the nozzle. And you squeeze the handle one more time anyway. Just a little more, you think. To round up the number. To get the most out of the tank. But here's the detail most drivers don't know. That gesture, which seems completely harmless, can end up costing you far more than those few extra cents you're trying to squeeze out, because your fuel tank is not designed to be filled to the brim. The system needs space to work properly. Your car has vapor recovery and ventilation circuits built specifically to manage the gases that gasoline produces. And when you keep squeezing after the click, you can force liquid fuel into areas where only vapor should be. That's where the problems start. That excess fuel can reach delicate components like the charcoal canister and the EVAP system. And while those names sound technical, their job is straightforward: to capture and control fuel vapors so they don't escape uncontrolled or interfere with the vehicle's operation. But if liquid gas reaches those components instead of vapor, the system can become saturated, lose efficiency, or start to fail outright. What might you notice afterward? Strong gasoline smells near the car. Reduced system efficiency. EVAP system-related fault codes. Fuel that evaporates or even leaks. And in the worst case, repairs that can run anywhere from $200 to $800. All because of that small impulse to say, come on, just a little more. There's also something important to keep in mind. That extra fuel isn't always used the way you think it will be. Sometimes it doesn't give you any real extra range. Sometimes it just ends up where it shouldn't, evaporates, leaks out, or causes a breakdown you had absolutely no reason to pay for. That's why the solution is so obvious it almost goes without saying: when the nozzle clicks, you're done. Don't squeeze it again. Don't try to round up, don't try to squeeze the last dollar out of the pump. Because in this case, stopping on time doesn't just protect your car, it protects your wallet. And now something nobody tells you at the pump. Mistake number 15 happens in the very first seconds of filling up, and it's stealing fuel from you without showing up on any meter. 15. The silent loss of filling your tank too fast. Most drivers don't know this, but the speed at which you fill up can directly affect the actual amount of fuel that ends up in your tank. Here's the interesting part. Most people pull up to the pump, squeeze the handle all the way down, and wait to finish as fast as possible. On the surface, that makes sense. The faster the fuel flows, the less time you waste. But it's not that simple. When fuel moves too quickly through the hose and nozzle, it creates more agitation. And because of that turbulence, vapors and small air bubbles can mix in with the liquid. Why should that matter to you? Because those vapors take up space too. And you're not paying for sensations, you're paying for volume. This means that under certain conditions, some of what passes through the nozzle doesn't maintain the same proportion of pure liquid fuel you'd get with a slower, steadier flow. The result? a less accurate fill-up. And while it seems like a tiny difference, accumulated over months, it can represent an annual loss of roughly 2% to 6%. In many cases, that's practically the equivalent of a full tank of gas per year. The solution is dead simple. Don't always use the pump's maximum flow setting. Choose low or medium speed. Yes, it might take a few extra seconds, but in return, you'll generally get a more stable, more efficient fill-up with less margin for loss. And pay attention because the next mistake is even more common. 14. Always running on empty, the mistake that can get very expensive. Many drivers treat the low fuel warning as extra breathing room and think it'll hold a little longer. So they keep driving, put off stopping for gas and squeeze out every last mile they can. It seems like a harmless habit. Until one day it isn't. Because driving with your tank nearly empty doesn't just increase the odds of getting stranded at the worst possible moment. It can also end up damaging key components in your car and draining your wallet much faster than you'd imagine. And the reason is more serious than it looks. The fuel pump, in many vehicles, is cooled at least in part by the fuel itself sitting inside the tank. In other words, gasoline isn't only there to move the car. It also helps keep that component working under more stable conditions. So when the level drops too low and you drive for extended periods on empty, the pump can run with less cooling and face greater thermal stress. And when a mechanical component runs hotter than it should for too long, wear starts to accelerate. But the problem doesn't stop there. There's another detail many people overlook that can make things worse. Over time, sediment, dirt, and small particles can accumulate at the bottom of the tank. Nothing dramatic, nothing visible to the naked eye, but it's there. And when you drive with very little fuel, the odds increase that those deposits get pulled into the system. That debris can interfere with normal operation and cause less consistent fuel delivery. So what does that translate to in real life? Increased pump wear, less consistent fuel supply, and in the worst case, a serious breakdown that can cost you between $800 and $1,500. And here's the uncomfortable question. Is it really worth delaying a stop at the pump to risk a repair bill that size? The solution is simple and far smarter: fill up when the tank reaches about a quarter. You don't always need to fill it to the top. But you do need to stop treating the low fuel light as your starting point. Don't wait for the needle to hit the red before you react. Because trying to save a few minutes today can turn into a very expensive bill tomorrow. And the most ironic part? Many drivers don't realize it until the car starts acting up at exactly the moment they need it most. 13. Paying more for premium gas when your car doesn't need it. There's a myth that costs millions of drivers money every year. And you've probably believed it too. A lot of people assume that premium gasoline automatically means better performance for their vehicle. And that's understandable because premium sounds superior. But here's the problem. That logic is incomplete. The octane rating doesn't indicate that the fuel has more power. What it actually measures is its resistance to premature detonation, its ability not to ignite before the right moment inside the cylinder. Nothing more, nothing less. And that changes everything. Since every engine is designed to specific requirements, if yours doesn't call for a higher octane level, using premium gas provides virtually no real benefit. The engine simply isn't built to take advantage of it. It's like buying a precision torque wrench to tighten an ordinary bolt. Pure overkill that solves nothing. The consequences more tangible than they seem. Depending on where you live, you're paying between 30 cents and 60 cents more per gallon. A difference that seems small until you run the annual numbers. The result can be $200 to $500 a year completely wasted with zero return in performance, efficiency, or longevity. The solution, fortunately, is as simple as it is effective. Use exactly the fuel your vehicle's manufacturer recommends. Not a lower octane which can damage the engine, and not a higher one, which just empties your wallet for no reason, because in this case the right choice and the most cost-effective one are exactly the same thing. But if you think fuel is your only hidden cost, what comes next will change the way you think about every trip. Mistake number 12 is charging you silently on every single mile, literally. 12. Tire pressure, the neglect that quietly charges you. Your tires could be taking money right out of your pocket with every mile. And the most worrying part is that many drivers don't notice until they've already spent way too much. At a glance, a tire can look perfectly fine. The car keeps moving, no warning light comes on, and everything seems to be in order. But that's exactly where the trap lies. A tire can be running below the proper pressure and keep rolling along as if nothing's wrong, while slowly increasing your costs. Because when a tire runs with low pressure, rolling resistance increases. In other words, the car has to work harder to move forward, and if moving forward takes more effort, the engine needs to put in extra work to get the vehicle down the road. That extra effort isn't free. The direct consequence is clear: higher fuel consumption. Every trip starts costing you more than it should, even if you don't feel it in the moment. You drive the same way, take the same route, arrive at the same time, but you're paying more. And that's not all. While consumption goes up, the tire also starts wearing unevenly. Some areas take more punishment than others, the useful life shortens, and you end up replacing your tires sooner than you should. In other words, you pay more to drive today, and you'll be paying again before long. Simply put, the problem hits you twice. First, you lose range, because you cover fewer miles on the same tank. Then you burn more fuel, and on top of that, your tires don't last as long. Here's the number that stings. This simple oversight can cost you between $100 and $300 a year. All for something that takes just a few minutes to check. The solution, fortunately, is straightforward. Check your tire pressure at least once a month. And if you can do it every time you fill up, even better. Because then it becomes an automatic habit and you stop relying on memory. A small action repeated over time prevents a constant expense. That said, there's one important detail. This isn't about inflating them by feel or picking a random number. The right approach is to use the pressure recommended by your vehicle's manufacturer, which is usually found on the sticker inside the driver's door jamb, on the fuel cap, or in the owner's manual. Because too much pressure isn't good either, and too little is expensive. Most drivers think about the engine when they talk about fuel consumption, but often the money is leaking out where they least expect it. The four tires touching the pavement. And watch out, because here's another mistake that far too many people keep making: checking tire pressure only when they already notice something's off. By then, they've probably been losing money for weeks without knowing it. 11. The hidden cost of letting your engine idle after filling up. Picture this. You've just topped off your tank, turn the key, the engine fires up. And instead of driving away, you just sit there. You check your phone, set up the GPS, or simply wait a few minutes because it doesn't matter. But wait a second. That little delay that seems harmless is costing you real money. Why? Because an engine idling burns fuel without the car moving a single inch. And here's the key detail almost nobody notices. Right after a cold start or when temperatures shift, the air-fuel mixture can run slightly richer, which means the engine is burning even more gas than it needs to. This creates real, measurable consequences: wasted fuel that adds up trip after trip. Between $100 and $300 a year in many cases just from this one repeated habit. The good news is that the solution is as simple as it is effective. Start the engine and pull away smoothly within 30 seconds. That's it. No unnecessary waiting, no wasted fuel, and no reason to let a bad habit you thought was harmless keep costing you. Ready to break it starting today? Your engine paid, and your bank account will thank you. 10. The mistake that steals hundreds of dollars. Flooring it the second you leave the pump. Boom. You just filled up, you pay, you pull out of the station, and bam! A lot of drivers do exactly the same thing. They floor the gas pedal like the station is on fire, merge into traffic with a hard punch of the accelerator, and take off like they're shooting a fast and furious scene. Sound familiar? Well, buckle up, because here's something that's going to leave you speechless. Those first few minutes after filling up are far more expensive than anyone imagines. And that's not an exaggeration. Why does this happen? Because when you accelerate aggressively and abruptly right after starting up, the ECU, the car's onboard computer, detects the sudden demand for power and automatically injects a heavy extra dose of fuel to respond instantly. It's like the engine saying, "You need power right now. Here, take more gas." The direct result? No sugarcoating. More hard acceleration equals more fuel burned in a matter of seconds. And the real consequences pile up without you ever noticing. A high fuel spike every single time you leave a gas station. More carbon buildup accumulating inside the engine over the long haul. Lower efficiency in city driving, which is exactly where you spend most of your time. Between $200 and $600 a year, just from this one small repeated habit. But here's the best part, the easiest thing to change. The solution is as simple as it is effective, and above all, it's completely free. Drive gently for the first few minutes, so you don't need to launch out of there like you're late to something important. A smooth, gradual, controlled acceleration is all it takes to let the engine work intelligently and efficiently from the very first foot of pavement. Want to start saving real money on every fill-up and feel your wallet breathe a little easier? Apply it from the next time you pull out of a gas station. I promise you'll feel the difference. And so will your checking account. Ready to kick this habit once and for all? Stay with me, because the next one is even more eye-opening. And things are getting serious now. Because the next mistakes are the ones that move the most money every year. And most drivers repeat them every time they stop for gas without any idea of the damage they're doing. 9. Ignoring the signals the pump nozzle gives you. The pump nozzle doesn't just dispense fuel. It can also warn you when something isn't working the way it should. And here's a detail that many drivers overlook. If the nozzle clicks off too soon, stops multiple times in a row, or feels like it's behaving strangely, it doesn't always mean the tank is already full. In many cases, it can be a sign that something is interfering with the fill-up. This can happen for several reasons. For example, the nozzle might not be inserted properly, there could be too much vapor built up at the tank opening, or the fuel flow might be coming out irregularly. That's why forcing the fill and keep trying rarely fixes the problem. In fact, it can make things worse. And take this seriously, because the consequences are real. You could end up with an incomplete fill-up, cause fuel spills, or even put unnecessary stress on the EVRP system, which is responsible for managing fuel vapors. The solution is fairly simple. If the nozzle is acting up, first reduce the flow speed. Then reinsert it to make sure it's properly seated, and if the problem continues, switch to a different pump. Never force the nozzle. If it keeps clicking off, it's probably trying to tell you something. 8. The hidden warm tire trap that's making you overspend. Imagine you pull into a gas station after driving several miles, step out feeling prepared, and grab your pressure gauge to check the tires. Seems like the perfect moment, right? Here's something almost nobody sees coming. You're making a mistake that's quietly charging you without you realizing it. The problem is simple but sneaky. Your tires are already warm from constant friction against the road. When the air inside heats up, it naturally expands, so the reading you get will be higher than the true value. You think everything's fine, but the moment the car sits still and the tires cool down, that correct pressure vanishes and you're left with tires that are actually underinflated, and that's where the chain reaction begins. Hidden underinflation that flies under the radar. Higher fuel consumption because the engine has to work harder. Accelerated tire wear, meaning they wear out sooner and force you to replace them ahead of schedule. All of this adds up to unnecessary dollars wasted month after month. The solution is simpler than you think, and it only requires one small habit change. Check tire pressure when the tires are cold, before you start driving or after the car has been sitting still for at least 3 hours. That way, you'll get an accurate reading and avoid all those ghost expenses. 7. The silent habit that eats your gas. Repeated short trips. Picture your typical day. You leave the house, pop over to the grocery store on the corner, come back, head out again to grab something, and 5 minutes later, you're starting the engine for yet another quick errand. Sound familiar? That constant back and forth is one of the biggest killers of fuel efficiency. And most drivers have no idea how much damage they're doing. Why? Because engines consume far more fuel when they're cold. They need several miles to reach their optimal operating temperature and perform at their best. But on short trips, running to the store, coming back, heading out again, picking something up, another 5-minute hop, the engine never fully warms up. It stays stuck in that inefficient cold phase, burning more gas just to start and stop over and over again. The direct result of this habit: up to 20% higher consumption on every one of those trips. Accelerated mechanical wear throughout the entire engine. Oil that gets contaminated much sooner than normal. The solution is as logical as it is powerful, and it completely changes the game. Combine all your errands into one longer trip. Fewer cold starts, less unnecessary fuel burned, and much better efficiency out of every gallon you put in. Try it the next time you have things to take care of. Bundle everything into one smart outing and you'll see how much longer the tank lasts. And your wallet too. Want to keep uncovering these tips that actually make a difference? Stay with me, because the next one is even more surprising. 6. Pumping low quality or contaminated fuel. This is one of those mistakes that can keep any driver up at night, because it doesn't just hit the wallet, it can end up seriously damaging the car. While it doesn't happen every day, there are cases where a gas station can have fuel contaminated with water, dirt, sediment, or product that's been stored under poor conditions. This can be due to leaks in the underground tanks, lack of maintenance, problems during delivery, or poor storage management. And here's the important thing. When that fuel enters the vehicle system, the car can start showing signs almost immediately. The warning signs after filling up can be pretty clear. The engine may shake more than normal. You might feel jerking when accelerating, loss of power, difficulty starting, the check engine light coming on, a sudden spike in fuel consumption, unusual smoke, or rough overall operation. And why take it seriously? Because the real consequences can range from poor combustion and reduced mileage per gallon, to dirty injectors, a clogged fuel filter, and costly repairs if the problem continues. The simplest solution is to fill up at reliable stations with good vehicle traffic and a solid reputation, because a station with constant turnover tends to cycle through its fuel supply more quickly. And if your car starts acting up right after you fill the tank, hold on to your receipt. That small piece of paper can become the most important piece of evidence to pinpoint where the problem started. 5. Rolling down the windows on the highway. The savings that actually costs more. It seems like a smart decision. It feels like you're saving money. But there's something most people don't know. Driving with the windows down at highway speeds can actually be more expensive than running the air conditioning. And the reason is physics, not opinion. When you open the windows on the highway, your vehicle's aerodynamics take a serious hit. The airflow that used to wrap smoothly around the car now slams into the cabin, enters through the openings, and creates drag. And because the engine needs energy to overcome that added resistance, your fuel consumption goes up, even if your foot is in exactly the same position on the pedal. The result is concrete, up to 10% higher fuel consumption on the highway. That's not a negligible change. On top of that, the cabin fills with constant wind noise that causes fatigue, and the engine works under more mechanical strain than necessary. 3 negative consequences in exchange for what you thought was a money-saving move. Now, this doesn't mean opening the windows is always a mistake. Context is everything. In the city, at low speeds, aerodynamic drag is minimal and ventilating the car without using the AC makes complete sense. But the moment you get on a highway or freeway, the equation changes entirely. In that scenario, the air conditioning is the more efficient option. Real savings aren't always where they appear to be. Sometimes spending a little less in the moment ends up costing a lot more in the end. Only 4 mistakes left. And fair warning, the last 2 are the ones that cost the most money per year. One involves something sitting in your car right now. And number 1, is the habit almost everyone has and nobody talks about. 4. The hidden danger of filling up at ghost stations. Here's one of the most overlooked tips that could be hitting your wallet without you knowing it. Not all gas stations are equal. Some are so busy that fuel barely sits in the underground tanks for a few hours. Others are nearly empty of customers all day long. Why does this matter? Because at stations with very little traffic, the fuel sits in storage for much longer. And as days or weeks go by, that fuel can begin to degrade, oxidize, or even absorb moisture from the air. When you pump that old fuel into your tank, the engine doesn't burn it as efficiently. Did you know that going cheap sometimes costs you a fortune, without you even realizing it? The real consequences start showing up gradually. Less efficient combustion. The engine gets less out of every gallon. Increased carbon buildup and deposits. Performance that gradually declines over time. The solution is as simple as it is smart. Always prioritize busy, well-known stations with high fuel turnover. Look for the ones you see consistently full of cars. Cheap doesn't always mean savings, and in this case, choosing the right station can save you money and headaches over the long run. Start being selective about where you fill up, and you'll notice your car responding better and running more efficiently. Want to keep saving for real? The next tip is one of the highest impact ones for everyday driving. Don't miss it. 3. When the pump doesn't measure right, your wallet pays for it. This is one of those mistakes that many drivers never even suspect. But watch out, because it can make you lose money every time you stop to fill up. Not all pumps operate with the same level of accuracy. Some may be worn down, poorly calibrated, or simply out of adjustment from a lack of maintenance. And when that happens, the number on the screen doesn't always accurately reflect the real amount of fuel entering your tank. Put another way, you pay as if you received a certain number of gallons, but you might be getting slightly less. And here's the key detail. Even if the difference on a single fill-up seems tiny, over weeks and months that small gap can turn into money quietly disappearing from your pocket. There are signs that should make you raise an eyebrow. For example, if the pump clicks off too early several times in a row, if the gallons don't add up to what your car normally takes, or if the dollar amount ticks up fast while the fill feels slow, inconsistent, or strange. And pay attention. If other drivers are also complaining about that station, don't chalk it up to coincidence. It's also worth observing the general condition of the station. If it looks run down, with old equipment and little visible upkeep, that can be a sign its pumps aren't in the best shape. The consequences are clear. You could end up paying for fuel you're not actually receiving with full accuracy, dealing with inconsistent fill-ups, making more frequent trips to the pump, and racking up a quiet, steady loss over time. The solution is simple. Fill up at well-known stations with good customer turnover and visible maintenance. And if you notice that at a particular station your car always seems to take more gallons than usual, be suspicious. Your tank doesn't change size from one week to the next, because sometimes the problem isn't how much your car consumes, it's where you're filling the tank. 2. The invisible weight that makes you burn more gas. Many drivers are unknowingly hauling half a hardware store in their trunk. And here's the funny part, it's not always big stuff. Sometimes it's just small things that piled up over months. Tools that almost never get used, old boxes, bottles, forgotten items, bags, accessories, loose parts, or any load that just stayed there just in case. The problem is that just in case has a price, because every extra pound forces the engine to work harder to move the car. And if the engine works harder, it burns more fuel. Simple as that. The consequences creep up slowly. Consistently higher consumption, sluggish acceleration, more strain on the brakes and suspension. And by the end of the year, that useless weight can represent between $100 and $300 thrown away on gas. The solution is simple. Empty the car. Go through the trunk, take out everything you don't use, and leave only what you genuinely need for real emergencies. Your trunk is not a storage unit, and every forgotten item back there could be quietly billing you for gas with every single trip. And we've arrived at number 1. The habit that burns the most gas. It's not the engine. It's not the weight. It's not the gas station. It's you. Every day. On every trip. And it can cost you up to $1,000 a year. Don't go anywhere. The habit that drains your tank the most? Driving without a rhythm. Most drivers believe that fuel consumption depends only on the engine, the size of the car, or the price of gas. But there's a far quieter habit that can end up costing more than all the others combined. And the most dangerous thing about it is that it seems completely normal. Accelerate, let off the gas, brake, accelerate again. Repeat it over and over. That pattern, as harmless as it looks, turns your car into an energy-wasting machine. Because every time you press the accelerator, the engine injects more fuel to generate power. But if you're braking just seconds later, all that energy you just created gets lost as heat through the brakes. In other words, you're paying for gas to create motion, and then using the brakes to destroy it. And here's what makes it interesting. You don't have to be driving recklessly for this to happen. It often comes from small, constant speed variations. You climb to 75, drop to 60, come back to 70, brake a little, accelerate again. And without realizing it, your consumption spikes. This happens a lot in traffic, when you're distracted, when you're following too close to the car in front, when you react too late, or when you're driving with tension. It also happens when you're staring only at the bumper of the car right ahead of you, instead of looking further down the road and anticipating what's coming. And take note, the problem isn't just the gas. Choppy driving also wears down the brakes, forces the engine to work under more stress, and makes the trip more exhausting for you and everyone riding with you. The real consequences can be significant. Up to 30% less efficiency, greater brake wear, more strain on the engine, and between $500 and $1,000 a year wasted on irregular driving. The solution is not to drive slower, that's the part most people get wrong. The key is to drive consistently. Maintain a steady speed whenever possible. Look several cars ahead, not just the one right in front of you. Accelerate gradually, brake early, and avoid tailgating. Because when you follow too closely, your car starts copying every mistake the driver ahead makes. If they brake, you brake. If they accelerate, you accelerate. If they hesitate, you waste fuel. On the highway, if your car has cruise control and conditions are safe, use it. It can help you hold a more even pace and avoid those small but constant speed changes that end up draining the tank. Because this isn't just about driving more gently, it's about managing energy the right way. When you understand this, you start seeing the road differently. You're no longer reacting too late. You're anticipating. You're no longer accelerating just to brake 20 feet later. You're letting the car flow. You're no longer burning fuel on impulse. You're using it with intention. And then something interesting happens. The car seems to use less gas. The ride feels calmer, and you start to realize how many times before you were throwing money away without knowing it. Because most of the time the problem wasn't the engine or the gas or even the traffic. It was your right foot making bad decisions every few seconds.